Hello and welcome to another episode of the TrepTECH podcast. I am your co-host, Scott Doucet, and I am here with the enlightened, the exuberant, the enthusiastic Airial Renal, who is our host. And this week is going to be a little bit different. Last week, we gushed and loved and fawned and fanned over Airial and everything that she is, does, and is capable of. But this week, we're going to talk about me. We're going to figure out exactly who I am, why I matter, and why Airial, after all of these years, is still willing to put my ass in front of a microphone and host a podcast with her. So this is going to be a very different episode, but hopefully it's fun because I'm not a very fun person. I'm really hoping that Airial brings out a lot of whatever personality is in here and helps me make this a fun episode. So Airial, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to brag about myself this episode.
Of course. I mean, you let me brag and you bragged about me and then I talked about it. Different point. So, hey, that works. Fair is fair.
I love it. So yeah, I don't know where you want to take this episode. So I'm just going to do my thing now and bow out and wait for you to take the reins and lead the thing. Cause I haven't heard you host an episode since The Veteran Woman way back in the day. So I am very, very excited. And I don't think I ever got interviewed on that show. So I don't think I've ever been interviewed by you. So I'm very, very excited for this opportunity.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Okay. I'm going to have to look back in the archives and
maybe, but I don't recall if I did.
Oh, wow. Well, here we go. So welcome, everyone. Scott already did the intro and everything. What I want to say is Scott is amazing. He is a very, very good friend of mine, even though we've never met. And it's been years. It may have been at least a decade now. It's been years since we've known each other. And I mean, we've talked about the ebbs and flows of business, our businesses. We've watched each other grow. And I've watched Scott grow a whole basketball team over there with his wife and kids.
A bunch of short white kids, a basketball team.
Larry Bird. That's all I'm going to say.
A hockey team, hopefully. I'm hoping for a hockey team.
Or a curling team.
Oh, yeah. That's far fewer. I need far fewer for a curling team. Let's roll with that.
A Roomba and a Swiffer.
Oh, that'll keep them busy for days. I'm here for it.
Right. If you don't know what curling is, just look it up. It's
a Canadian sport with brooms and rocks and ice.
It's hilarious.
People throw rocks on the ice and then sweep it off. You'll see.
It is an Olympic sport. And it blows my mind. Anywho, I kind of got off on a tangent.
Why Airial likes football.
I love football. What are you talking about? I love football.
That's what I mean. I suppose. It's not love.
Yeah. So it's been forever since we've been on the air together. I know we still keep in touch, but we're not in touch as we have been in the past. So just update me on what's going on. I know you're still doing podcast production, which you are fucking amazing at. Anybody, if you need podcast production, Scott and his team are it. No ifs, ands, or buts. So Scott, just update us on what's been going on, because I know you've branched out and now you've moved into corporate and bigger fish and just
okay. To give people kind of an idea, is like who I am now is really different from who I was when Airial and I first started talking. Basically, I had just gotten into a new relationship with who is now my wife. Like, we were just living together in our first year. We weren't even married yet when Airial and I met. And this would have been back in 2016, I think. And so I called Airial because I needed help with just basically understanding what a virtual assistant is supposed to do, because she worked with them. And I was like, I need to know what the fuck a virtual assistant does, because I feel like I've got too much responsibility and not enough brain capacity to do it all. So
Mm-hmm.
I called Airial and I was like, what can I make a virtual assistant do? Or what can I have, I guess, a virtual assistant do that I can't do that I, because I at the time was very controlling of all the components of my business. And by the end of the conversation, she had hired me. Now, at the time, I was like Scott, the podcast coach, and I had like really cringy video on like a one-page website where I was like, hey, this is podcasting, to the point where my wife made fun of me until I took it down. It was cringy. Like, it was bad. I worked at the very beginning with a super, like, he was good at what he did, but he kept things very safe and generic for the business world. And so I almost felt like I had to do the same. So I didn't have a voice back then. So as things went on, I started coaching people through podcasting and then realizing that they needed someone to actually do all of the editing and the graphics and the show notes and the uploading and the scheduling and the maintenance and talking to support. And they didn't want to do that. So I started doing that.
Mm-hmm.
We did that for a long time. And then I realized that I didn't necessarily want to be Scott Doucet, the dude. I wanted to be Podcast Bay, the brand. That's when Arial was like, well, I know brands. We kind of, Airial was one of the first unofficial members of Team Podcast Bay, helping me set up the initial infrastructure of Podcast Bay Productions. We never knew what it was going to become. And so fast forward to where I am now, we still do podcasting production even after all these years. And it's the main staple of what we do. But we provide a lot of different things. And so Podcast Bay Productions is actually the podcasting division of Scott Doucet Business Solutions.
And that sounds so sexy. I love how you came up with, the new name and branding, because,
Simple.
I geek out on that stuff. But you realize that with Podcast Bay, it attracted, actually, you know what? Instead of me telling people what I see from my point of view, how did you go from Podcast Bay and that branding, which you still hold,
Oh God,
to
yeah.
What's the Scott
Doucet Business Solutions. Business
Solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you
So,
make that transition
boredom.
and why?
Boredom. I got really bored. I got so bored. From 2016 to 2022, all I did was podcast editing, podcast production, show notes, graphics, launches. We've launched at probably close to 100 podcasts at this point for other people.
Wow.
I was launching some of my own shows, never getting any traction, kind of fell out of love with hosting. And I just got really bored of the industry. If I'm going to be completely honest with you, it's been many, many years. And in a lot of ways, the industry hasn't evolved. In other ways, it's evolved huge, but there's still a lot of like romanticizing and people being defeatist and not thinking there's any money and all that stuff. And that got really, I don't know. There's only so long you can want to be in an industry where profit isn't welcome. And so I started looking around and thinking, like, what else can I do? I don't want to let go of this because I have a team here. I have a editor here. There's a gentleman named, so I'm just going to use names. I have an editor who's named Jesse. He's probably the best podcast editor I've ever met in my life. I want to keep paying him. He's got a beautiful little girl who would probably like to eat. So, I pay him. I have Rob. He's an Australian bloke who has, and I've heard it 21 times now, and he's only put out 37 episodes, and 21 times I've heard the guests tell him he is the greatest introduction in podcasting.
Wow.
I'm hoping to give him a runner up with this show every time I introduce you. So, but he right. I'm not taking that shit lying down. Are you kidding me? Rob's the best podcast host. Fuck you. So Rob, if you're listening, and I know you are, it's on.
The competition is on. Begins.
Rob and I are neck and neck. We both do push-ups in the team chat, and we're at each other all the time. If I cook, he's cooking. Like, we're really, like, it's fun. I love my dynamic. He's like having a best friend I've never met, kind of like you, right? Like, you're like having a best friend I've never met. And I just recently hired a writer too. And, my writer has a son, and I want to provide for them. And so I didn't want to give up Podcast Bay. I wanted to make sure that it was still paying the people that I put in place to support it. But I was bored. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do what I can for Podcast Bay, but I'm going to go looking for something else. And I ended up enrolling into Jessica Lorimer's The C-Suite. And Jessica Lorimer is a longstanding client of mine, but she is without a doubt the best salesperson I've ever met. Like I would argue she is one of the top 5 salespeople on the planet.
And you working on her podcast has been a huge success, I hear.
Oh, wow. She has made, I can't disclose the amount of money she has made publicly until she does, because I signed a contract. But
boo-hoo. Let's just say boo-hoo.
yeah, but she has made an astounding case for just how profitable a podcast can be. And so she and I have this beautiful synergistic approach where, you know, like she basically is putting Scotland through college. And as a result, I am providing her an amplifier through her podcast for her sales channels. And man, does she know how to use it. It's so incredible. I've learned so much. So I signed up for her C-Suite, which is all about corporate sales. And I was looking at Podcast Bay, and Podcast Bay is like a skull and crossbones that is like becomes a microphone. And it's very like heavy on the rogue, hoisting the black flag, being an independent, getting out there, being a rebel, doing your thing, speaking your truth, no matter what that is, making money, because pirates love money, you know, and just being free to do what you want. And that's very opposite. You know, the corporate world has a lot of like all the power to the cause. We're all going to conform so that we make sure we're doing the right things. We're going to standardize. We're going to ensure that there's no room for mistake. We're going to be really heavy on the training, really heavy on the education. We're not necessarily going to give individual, you know, kudos, but we're going to make sure that the team grows all together as one big unit. And I was like, okay, Podcast Bay is not professional enough to deal with these people.
Oh, let me interrupt you right there. It sounds like we need to do an episode on breaking into corporate.
Yeah, we definitely can do that.
Because that's something I thought about, but I don't know. That sounds like it may be boring.
If you are an employee, yes, but if you are an external provider, no. If you're coming into the corporate as Airial, who knows her shit, and they're hiring you for a lunch and learn or a keynote or a program or a workshop, then you're just coming in for the weekend and doing your thing, you know, and they're cutting you a check for it. So I think corporate sales is huge. And I think that if you want to get into corporate sales, you should definitely look up Jessica Lorimer's C-Suite, because I cannot teach it the way she teaches it, and I'm never going to, but I can 100% speak to the fact that I already am recouping my investment on it. I've only been in it 6 months, and I think I started recouping my investment 3 months ago. So like within the first 90 days, I had started saying contract numbers that I never thought I'd say in my life. And I was like, okay, like I'm not out of the woods yet, because I dropped a boatload on it, which is changed. It's dropped in price because it's no longer like a big live thing. It's actually an accredited course that you just go in and take, which I think is incredible because I don't like talking to people. So the fact that she's changed it up and dropped the price means it's more accessible to everyone and less work for her, honestly, which I friggin' adore for her because she's put in the reps. But I really do think that she's brilliant beyond measure, and that I would not be in the position I'm in if I hadn't met her and started working with her on a long-term basis. Like my daughter is literally going to college based on this woman's contribution to my life, right? So like that's a big fucking deal to me.
You've always sang Jessica's praises.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, so, you know, sometimes I look in the mirror and I don't know where Jess ends and I begin anymore.
Oh, wow.
Because like I have onboarded so much of her content and her material that I'm just like, it's unreal to me that a person can impact another person's life so much. So yeah, huge praise for Jess. And I realized that, you know what, like if I want to do business in a corporate environment, I kind of have to bring my own corporate modality. I have to bring my own corporate image. I have to bring my own corporate self. I've never had a corporate self. So, you know, I looked at what that would be. And as I was going through, I was like, what do I want to offer them? And I kind of want to consult them on media, you know, how media can perpetuate their businesses. How can not-for-profits use podcasting to deepen their donation pools? How can major corporations use podcasts or video or photos to build trust with their audiences? And, you know, and have people think of them in a good light instead of being like, oh, that big evil company, you know?
Yeah.
Because that's what the media is. And that's where I excel, right? But as I was doing this, all of my colleagues that work for me in Podcast Bay We're like, I have this talent or I have this talent. I'm great at streaming. Used to be a librarian. I'm a qualitative researcher. You know, I'm a systems and operations guy. I can build corporate dashboards like you wouldn't believe. And I was like, we actually have a lot of services here that a corporate could benefit from. So instead of just sticking to media, why don't we just become a business solutions firm and see what business comes in, see who we can help and who we can't. Because I'm on the phone doing cold calls. I jump on the phone and I'm like, hey, what does your business need? They'll tell me.
Wow.
They'll tell me flat out. They'll be like, oh man, we're struggling with blank, 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 blank. And I'm like, okay. Well, then let's see what things that we could potentially do for you to take some of that off your hands. We created a kind of a trust, a collective of people under Scott Doucet Business Solutions who can come in and provide a lot of different services to people. And so that's kind of where I am now, is like I have my flagship is SDBS, Scott Doucet Business Solutions, but we have a podcasting division that handles the podcasting side of our media. I would love to grow to get a video side, a video division. I would love to have a graphics division. There's a lot of things that I would love to do with this company, but we're starting from the bottom up, basically. So,
wow,
had a bunch of kids. I've got 3 kids right now: a daughter who's my eldest, and 2 boys. My oldest is 4.5. My youngest is 6 months right now. Married. I've been married since 2017. My wife is awesome. I have nothing but praise to sing about her as a mother and as a person. She's a great person. And I will say, like, kudos to her, because it takes a lot to be married to an entrepreneur. Because
it really, really does. Really, really does.
It's not always perfect. It's not always pretty, but she's never told me to quit. If anything, she's smacked the sense back into me and made me come back to this so many times. Even when it was setting our life back, like, to tell you a story, and I'm sure some of our audience might be able to relate to this. We tried to get an apartment close to her parents out in Toronto, which is like a major city. Because I owned the company, I couldn't get the apartment, but my employees could go out and get apartments, no problem. And that's
really,
yeah, because I was the high risk one. I was the one shouldering all the burden. If something went wrong, it was my ass and not theirs, And so what ended up happening was I couldn't get a place to live, and we ended up we bought a house cash because we got desperate and we found a house that we could afford, and we just like floored our savings and got it done. But like that, even when my being in business was that much of a setback to our life, she did not let me stop. Because for me, that was all the clear indication I needed, that I need something stable that the banks recognize as a real job. You know what I mean? And she was like, no. She's like, you're going to turn this into one. And I was like, okay.
And you have. I mean, you support not only your family, but other families.
Yeah, Podcast Bay has 3 team members aside from me, and we have an operations guy who's literally working himself into a 60 grand a year job. He said he wants 60 grand a year, so he's going to figure out how to earn 60 grand a year with us. And he's set up some dashboards that I could easily sell to corporations for 60 grand. That's the thing. Like, we're looking, every single person who comes in this door has a skill set that adds to our pot. And then I'm the guy who jumps on the phone and says, what do you need? So when I'm the only one on the team who isn't gun shy about sales, so if that's the case, well, then I'm going to go and I'm going to sell all these really talented people.
And I've watched you do a sales call.
Persuasive as fuck, eh?
Well, 5 or 6 years ago versus like 5 or 6 months ago. And I'm like, who is this person? Like, wow.
Someone who is very confident in the services they offer, the price point they offer it at, and how much it has helped people.
Yeah.
I have produced podcasts for one of Richard Branson's former lawyers. I've produced I've produced a podcast for someone who has made £1 million off of their first 80 episodes. I have produced a podcast for someone who uses their podcast in their space to work for companies like Philips, Instagram, Red Hat, PepsiCo, that kind of stuff. I have produced podcasts for guys who literally have, by extension, gotten the participants of their conferences fucking acting gigs and saved marriages and turned men into absolutely way better versions of themselves. I have produced podcasts for you, that provided veteran resources and things for people.
I just got chills because the funny thing is I don't listen to podcasts, but I've been on your team, Podcast Babe Productions team, and had the Veteran Woman podcast, the TrepTECH podcast, and now the TrepTECH podcast 2.0. But it has been such an amazing podcasting for me has been such an amazing outlet. And just the Veteran Woman podcast, that was, oh my God, just amazing. And having your help with that, it helped me heal from all the transition woes I went through, moving from the military to civilian life, and speaking and reaching out to other veterans and hearing their stories and stuff. And then not having to worry about, how to get it on air and stuff, not having to worry about, the editing and stuff. I could just literally talk to people, and I knew that you would take it and pull out all the nuggets and just make it a great episode. Each episode, it has been life-changing from supporting families to supporting success. Like, you name dropped without name dropping, but you're so low key with it. Like, it's
because
like
it's not amazing to me. I don't know how to say this, but like I have a very big mentality of like, who next? Who can I help next? Who's going to find us valuable next? It's like, it's who's going to tell me I'm pretty today. I'm like, I really love the work we did, but honestly, like, until I stop and look back at it, like we just did, at no point am I like, wow, how did I get here? Until I stop and reflect. But while I'm in that zone of like, who next, like, I've got to be low key. I've got to be super humble, because if I let past successes get to my head, I'm going to think I'm better than I am. And I don't think that's good for business.
Right. I think you balance that very well.
I try.
With the confidence, you have the confidence, and you know how podcasting can be pivotal to the success of a business, how to use it, how to drive traffic, all that good stuff. And you've worked in B2C, business to consumer, to like business to business, so corporate world and corporate space. So you have that confidence, you have those accolades, you have that proof, but you're humble at the same time. And I just think that's a great balance, because when it comes to sales, that's what people worry about. Like, am I going to sound too salesy? You sound confident, but humble at the same time.
Can I share a little bit of an insight with you about something?
Absolutely. Is it something Jessica mentioned?
No, it's actually something you and I, it's something you and I have experienced together. But if you want Jessica's insights, you could pay for the course. I'll give you the link. I have an affiliate link by now, I'm sure. If I don't, I'm going to go get one and put it on this episode. But when you and I were on that sales call and I had to turn in a proposal to your client, the proposal I handed in got absolutely dissected. And I'm not going to lie to you, the part of me that has been approaching not-for-profits and charities and corporates, part of my ego did jump in there for a second and say, like, man, what is this guy talking about? Like, where's he coming from? I don't understand.
And I did notice that. I noticed that.
But what happened was, like, there was a certain point when he had taken a consultative part of my proposal and said, like, I don't understand the value here. And once my ego subsided and I watched the video and I sat with it, then I watched it again, then I sat with it. I think I watched it like 3 times just to be like, okay, where is this guy's hangups so that I can properly come to him and address his concerns. And so I started watching the video the 3rd time and I was like, he just told me I don't understand the value here. That's the hangup. He doesn't understand the value of the consults, of the monthly meetings. I was like, okay, because on the corporate side, the corporate doesn't care about what button monkeys do to the podcast. They don't care about what the, like ESPN and all of those bigwigs, like when they have a media team, they're paying like $40,000 a year to their editor. It's not a big thing where they're like, oh, that editor is so good, we're going to give him $100,000. Like, that doesn't happen really, unless you're like an absolute god at what you do. So where corporates pay is the consultative side. They pay for your brain, they pay for your mind, they pay for your strategy, they pay for all that. And because I spent a little bit of time in that mind frame, when I went back to business to consumer sales, I kind of got shocked back to where consumers are, where entrepreneurs
Mm.
are. So I would honestly say that once you start dealing with corporates, dealing with consumers almost becomes strange land again. So what ended up happening was, and this is where the humble comes in, right? I wasn't like, well, corporates pay me, blah, blah, because I
Well,
don't,
a little bit. You were kind of brushing that off on me until I
well,
kind of
well,
heard
I
that
was talking
banter.
to, you about it. And I was like, I don't understand how to demonstrate this value to him is where my problem was. That was my hang up. His hang
Hmm.
up was I don't see the value. My hang up was I don't know how to demonstrate the value. And then we got on a call all together, the three of us, and it was one of those meetings. And the meeting was, how do I sell from my show?
Yes.
And that call, I feel, and maybe our client would feel differently or whatever. I haven't gone back to ask, but he seemed like he really enjoyed that call. That call, in my opinion, is what demonstrated the value of those meetings, right?
Hmm.
If I hadn't been able to swallow the ego and humble out, if I was like, I worked for Richard Branson's lawyer, there wouldn't be a podcast produced by me for this client right now.
And you know what? I think another factor is because this client was a new client for me as well, but we had established rapport. And I told them about you, bragging like I brag. And I kind of broke it down from a different perspective. You were able to come in with the numbers, the credit. I want to say accreditation, but that doesn't sound like the right word. But you had the accolades, the experience and everything.
The
And
credibility.
credibility, there you go. And I was kind of like, look, first of all, any other podcast editor, whenever you send in an episode, they're going to ask you to work with timestamps to figure out what to take out and all that stuff. I said, but Scott and his team, you and your team, are intuitive editors. That is what got me with you, because if I'm going to sit here and say, take out this at this, or take out this whole section
You might
at
as well
this
do it
time step,
yourself.
I might as well do it. Exactly.
Yeah.
But when we had our first quote unquote sales call, you said intuitive, and that takes so much stress off, so much headache off. I just know, record the episode, let it flow, and Scott will handle it. You know enough to say, this is a vital piece of information. Let's draw it out to put in show notes, to put in quotes, to put in audiograms, and also editing to where you make sure you keep in those golden nuggets and stuff. It's just, it blows my mind. It's amazing, Scott.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. You're making me blush over here. I really don't like attention and compliments, and they make me shrink in my seat a bit, but I appreciate it. You're challenging me, and I love that. For me, it's one of those things where I look at it very simplistically, and it's, can I make you sound any cleaner? And can I make you sound any smarter? And if the answer is yes, I go back. And that has served me so well, because you're trying to sell yourself to your audience. You're trying to sell your solutions to your audience. If you sound dumb because you're stammering over your words, or you can't articulate your thoughts, or you throw half a dozen well before everything you say, that's going to lose faith from your audience. So if I can trim that out and have you clearly articulate a thought and lose as little audience buy-in as possible from transitions or unarticulated thoughts, I'm going to do that. And then also on the other side of that is, there's two kinds of listeners. There's a content junkie and there's an audiophile. Content junkies never complain when your audio gets better, but audiophiles complain when it's crap. So I'm trying to make you sound smart, and I'm trying to have you appeal to the largest demographic of audio lovers possible. And by marrying the two of those things, we've created a relatively effective product for people. So it's been really good. And then because other people are doing it now, it's not all my work. It's so much easier to sell it. I'm selling Jesse. I'm selling, Rob. I'm selling other people, and I love them to death, and I want to see them eat. So of course I'm going to sell, the hell out of them. And so like just it's become a perfect marriage of all the things that I needed to make sure that I could ride this thing as far as it'll possibly go.
Wow. So are you still going to be working with the little people, or have you moved into just working with straight corporate?
It's interesting you say that. Things are getting a little convoluted and complicated over here at Scott Doucet Business Solutions. So what we've done right now is we've brought on a couple of podcasts, ideally this being one of them, where we now need sales channels, right? So we are sponsoring a streamer on Twitch right now, and we're starting a show for him because he's got a ravenous little audience who love him to death. He's got an awesome work ethic and drive, and he loves his stuff. And so we're sponsoring him, and he's going to drive traffic to us from streamers who want podcasts. You know, we're partnering with you because we want to talk to authors and business owners and veterans who want podcasts. And then we pay Rob to host Podcast Bay, the podcast, which is an incubator. It's like a spotlight. Oh, look at this podcaster. They're awesome. But what that does on a meta level, on a more macro level, is we have had hosts from that show reach out to us for production help. Guests who come on that show as our guests are like, when they suddenly need help, they're like, oh, I remember I was on Podcast Bay and Rob mentioned that they do this. Rob also emails them at the beginning of the year every year and says, hello, esteemed guest of Podcast Bay. It's been great, et cetera, et cetera. We're filling up our production calendar this year. Is there anything we can take off your hands? So he's created this beautiful show with this beautiful rapport with all these beautiful podcast hosts who need beautiful podcast production. And we provide that, so yes, we're working with the little people. Corporate right now, I'm dabbling in. If I'm going to be completely honest with you, I'm dabbling there. I know B2C. I'm new to B2B. And so I'm definitely not going to cut my sails before I have my oars in the water.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple of years from now, I don't know. But right now, yeah, we're absolutely working with the little, I wouldn't necessarily even call them the little people, just different missioned people.
Okay. Let me ask you this question. So you have people like me, micro business, and then you have people like Richard Branson's lawyer, for instance. And then you have like whatever a corporation is, like a big name brand. When you said like the lawyer, in my brain, I think that's corporate, but you don't consider that corporate?
I don't consider it corporate simply because she ran it on an entrepreneurial basis.
Got it. So
right.
If it's kind of like an individual,
yes.
If you talk with the individual versus if you get a contract with where you have to talk through different sales departments or different departments and stuff.
Exactly.
Is that how it differs?
It differs in that regard, but it also differs in the mission. It differs in the fact that like if I do let's say I go and I do a media study with a corporate, I'm doing a media study with probably 100 individuals or 50 individuals. And so I'm making a huge impact for a lot of money. Whereas if I approach an entrepreneur, usually their teams are maybe 3 people thick at most. So scope of work varies, scope of impact varies. A lot of corporates, they would rather, get trainings on a licensing basis so they can just replay it over and over and over again for a fee. Whereas, when you create something for a corporate or for an entrepreneur, like it's usually something that's more like one-off. They're not going to license it. So like, it's honestly, it's a different approach every way you could imagine. But I find corporate to be a lot more simple. It's a lot more predictable.
Really?
I find entrepreneurs will make you climb an awful large mountain for the money they're giving you. And I find that corporations have no problem paying you a lot of money because they know how much you're going to end up saving them in the long run. And I find that that's always been the differentiator for me is kind of corporates understand the value just a little more intrinsically than the consumer or the entrepreneur does.
And I would love to do check-ins to see how you grow that side of your business, the corporate side, and the ins and outs of that, because that is very intriguing. Because like I said, what I thought in my brain, what would have qualified as corporate, just, in layman terms, it's different than, it's just different than what I was thinking. So it's very interesting. I'm intrigued.
Well, can I blow your mind a little bit? My list of corporates.
A little bit more?
Yeah, well, the list of quote unquote corporates that I'm calling for the next 90 days, are nonprofits with no podcast and a minimum donation pool of $2 million per annual.
A minimum?
Yeah. Because I know they have the funds and I know they have the reach and I know that they probably need a nurturing tool somewhere down the line that a podcast could provide, right? So like
Wow.
for me, I'm reaching out to just a different scope. And a lot of people are like, nonprofits are corporate. Yeah, they certainly are. Just because they're public sector and just because they're charity and just because they're not for profit doesn't mean they don't have budget. Quite frankly, they have to blow through their budget before it becomes profit. You're in a good place to chat with them, as long as they're successful. The only time you really get the, oh, well, we're not for profit is when you're dealing with the smaller ones. And that's no different than dealing with smaller entrepreneurs, right?
Okay, mind blown. I don't even know what to say.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm
it's just, wow.
like, again, compared to who I used to be, like I don't even, I look in the mirror and I don't even recognize myself anymore. It's so weird to sit here and be saying these kinds of things. When you and I first met, I was giving away coupons for a month worth of podcasting for $250.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now I'm like 25 grand.
Scared the shit out of yourself, huh?
You know what? Working for that lawyer for 24 episodes, she was incredible. But every time I saw her name come across my email, I got scared just because of the sheer amount of power and knowledge and know-how. Like this woman was so incredibly kind and wonderful and generous and resourceful. But just knowing how capable and intimidating she was, that's when I knew I was kind of working with a very different caliber of person, is because I was scared. Like I had that feeling of, am I going to be able to fucking do this? Am I the person?
Beautiful, beautiful. Oh, we have so much to unpack.
We got a long time to do it. We've, at least 26 episodes. We're doing a year of this, are we not?
Yes, and we have so much to unpack. I mean, so many golden nuggets for the year. I'm so excited. And I hope for those listening, if you have any questions, if you hear something and you have a question, submit your questions and we will answer it on air when we're having one of our chats.
Yeah.
And I mean, pick our brains. This is an opportunity to pick our brains for free. And, get the information you need to grow your own business, because it's possible. I mean, you may start small, but then, the sky isn't even the limit, is what I want to say, because it's just, you are your only limit. So get with people, network with people who have made that transition from small to big. That's how I'm going to label it, small to big, and see if that's a good fit for you. If you want to stay small, that is fine. It is nothing wrong with staying small. But so, for instance, working with solopreneurs. But if you want to look into tapping into corporate and those huge contracts, definitely keep tuning in. I hope we could get Jess on and, pick her brain a little bit about corporations and sales and corporate sales. Scott, just let me know if you can get us that hookup.
You know what? 100%. Jess is actually stepping away from business to consumer, but she does have the self-study set up, and I'm pretty sure she's going to want to plug the hell out of that. So I will reach out and I will beg, borrow, lie, cheat, and steal until she says yes. I don't care how much I have to grovel. I'll try my best to make that happen.
So, guys and gals that are listening, you have a lot to look forward to. We have a lot to look forward to. I am so excited. I'm glad Scott got his shit back together and decided to do this with me again, because I missed it so much. I missed my venting sessions. I missed the laughter. I missed, just working things out on air, working out ideas and figuring out how to package offers and how to talk about our offers. I miss bragging on each other so we didn't have to brag on ourselves, all of that. Guys and gals, let us know what you want to hear on this podcast. You will feed it. We will feed it. We will make this work and be successful. And Scott, do you have anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I want to say that in the last, I don't know, Well, since 2016, since I've started, there's one thing that I've noticed in the market, no matter what market you're doing, whether it's big corporate market or whether it's small independent markets, and very close knit niches, there's only one thing that you need to do to out hustle, I'd say 60% of the population, and that's show up. My team has shown up. Like I did private contracting for a summer, just like, installing floors and doing those types of things. We changed out the bottom of a trailer and did some metal work. And the reason why we got the job is because the guy talked to 4 other contractors and none of them showed up when it was time to get to work. Okay. I have had people run away with exuberant amounts of money and not show up. I've had people say they're going to turn in work and not show up. And all of that creates problems for your brand down the line. And there's a lot of people out there creating that problem for themselves. So if you are creating that problem for yourself and you're struggling to show up, stop promising or start showing up. That's number one. But number two is if you are someone who consistently shows up, understand that you are going to beat the living snot out of anyone who does not show up on this market. So have a little faith in yourself and understand that showing up is literally over 60% of the battle. And the other 40% is do great work once you're here. So if you have that formula where you know who you help, what you do, and how it transforms their life, and then you show up and do it well, you have the formula for success. And I'm just going to drop that right here on episode 1 that episode 2. You already have the formula for success if you have those things. So that is pretty much what I want to leave you with.
So show up with integrity and show up authentically. And that will change your world and the world of the people who you serve.